Live from Brooklyn, welcome to the SYCK podcast, starring Alan Stein, where he steers your career with Kadima. I'm Russ Reba, along with your host, Alan Stein, and we had a little delay, Alan, in our recording session for this because I was told you were a little under the weather, or you got sick, and I'm not talking SYCK, this would be the SICK, and I wanted to ask you, is everything okay?
Thanks, Russ, for caring. I have been SICK with the COVID. And after 2.5 years of avoiding this plague, and it is in fact a plague, I ventured out to a buddy of mine's kid's bat mitzvah in Denver, Colorado. And after doing the horror and enjoying the past hors d'oeuvres and enjoying the ice cream sundae bar, surprise, surprise, I came down with COVID.
Wow. You go to such a great celebration and then come out with that. Not the greatest, but did you fare okay with it?
It's been a tough week. I can't lie to you about that. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm extremely stuffy. My head is in a fog. I'm a little bit weak. But fortunately, thanks to my fantastic wife, Melanie, who plays and is a doctor in real life, she has helped nurse me back to care. I have quarantined myself in my office / guest room. My dogs, Coco and Tootsie, have been very empathetic to me. My kids, on the other hand, have been a little less so. I put a little bit of a kibosh and challenge to my daughter Jasmine's 14th birthday. But with me being quarantined up on the third floor, her and her friends were able to celebrate her 14th birthday a little bit late, but still celebrating her 14 years on this earth.
So a bright side to it. And if it's worth anything, you sound great. You don't sound too stuffy and too coughy. I know a lot of people have the tickle in their throat for quite a while after dealing with COVID.
Well, thank you, Russ. Flattery will get you everywhere.
All right. Well, as the recovery I know is long, I wish you a safe one and a speedy one.
Thanks. And as far as I know, people cannot catch COVID via podcast. So
doesn't transfer through the microphone.
Yeah. Hope the audience enjoys this podcast and stay safe and avoid COVID as much as you can.
Alan, you've had some pretty comprehensive interviews on the show so far. Excellent interviews, but this next one proves that you are certainly connecting with professionals all over the world.
That is true, Russ. This is our first transcontinental guest, Fabian Elliott, who is calling in all the way from Johannesburg, South Africa.
Wow.
I met him first while he was in Atlanta through a buddy of mine who knew him in Chicago. So Fabian has taken a tour all throughout the world, and I've been fortunate to remain in contact with him as he has traveled the globe. An interesting fact about Fabian is after Fabian and I met, he has put me in touch with 3 other friends or colleagues of his that were looking to accelerate their careers. And in each specific case, each one has worked with Kadima and has landed fantastic jobs. One of them at Facebook, one of them at Salesforce, and most recently, another one just landed a great job at Google. Wow. So Fabian not only has been a fan of Kadima and a supporter of Kadima, but he's had the magic touch of identifying people that can work with Kadima and accelerate their career.
So am I right that this episode is going to touch on professionals that are underappreciated and underpaid?
We will talk about that a bit in this episode.
I'm excited about this one. All right, so let's get into it.
I'd love for you to introduce yourself to the SYCK audience here.
Sure. So super excited to be on the podcast again, Alan, and happy to introduce myself to the audience. So as Alan mentioned, my name is Fabian Elliott. Currently based in Johannesburg, South Africa. Just recently relocated with Google, working on Google Cloud on our customer experience team. And so, looking forward to talking about the wild journey that I've been on so far.
Awesome. And let's go back to the start of how you first got into university. So you went to UNC Charlotte, and the way I do a lot of this is LinkedIn profile. And I know your LinkedIn profile is pretty active, and you have about 7,000 followers on there. So you have quite an audience there. But tell me how you wound up getting into UNC Charlotte, how you decided on that, and how you wound up there out of all the universities you were in the US at the time, but how did you wind up there?
Yeah, so I grew up in a small city of Fayetteville, North Carolina. My parents were in the military, but they met at Fayetteville State University, which is historically Black college, in Fayetteville. And so, when I was coming out of high school, I was having a little trouble figuring out what I wanted to do. And I used the process of elimination, which led me to business, just by the courses that I took. So for example, chemistry messed me up a bit. I was like, man, okay, maybe being a doctor, the medical field, isn't for me. And then I took AP Calculus my junior year of high school. And I was like, okay, I knew the engineering path. My older brother, he was an electrical engineer. He studied that in college, and he used to tell me about having to take calculus 2, 3, and 4, and all these other ones. And so I was like, okay, maybe engineering, even though I like math, maybe it's not for me. And I kept going through the process of elimination, and I was left with business because I'd always been, entrepreneurial and doing little side hustles growing up and things of that nature. And my senior year of high school, I mainly did, just athletics and sports, but I had a shoulder injury my senior year that I was only able to do fall sports. And after that, I had to find something to do. And I ended up getting involved with this marketing club called DECA, and, did some competitions, and, ended up being the first person from our school to go to the national competition. And so I was like, okay, this marketing thing seems pretty cool. And so when I was looking at schools, I knew my parents wouldn't be able to provide little to any, financial support. So I knew I had to stay in state, off the bat. And I needed to go to a public university. So that limited things very quickly. And so UNC Charlotte ended up on my radar because of, it being in Charlotte, the biggest city in North Carolina. And, I felt like that would be a good place from a business and marketing standpoint to get involved. And when I went to the campus, I just fell in love, and, that was that.
Nice. And it looks like you also worked through school. So not only were you paying for it yourself, well, it sounds like your parents weren't helping you out with that, but it looks like you were an RA during school, and you worked at Target.
Yeah, a little bit of everything. I was really close after my first semester. I was really in a pinch, and it was looking like I wouldn't be able to come back from my second semester. And there was a woman named Dr. Jody Turner that was working in our multicultural office. And I don't know how I ended up going to talk to her, but I told her about my challenge, and it just happened. She looked at my grades from high school, and somehow that helped. Well, that gave her the confidence to put me up for a scholarship that allowed me to get just enough to stay another semester. And then from there, like you said, I was able to, start working and, find other scholarships and, make it happen. So.
Nice. That was the first job I think I failed an interview on when I applied for my RA. I tried to become an RA in college, and they asked me why I wanted to be an RA. I was like, oh, I want to be buddies with everybody on the floor.
Right.
That's not going to work out.
Well, we had similar journeys, Alan, because I wasn't invited back to be an RA after I was an RA. So I got a little further than you did, but not much further.
Yeah, cool. And then it looks like you had an internship at Google. So I guess undergrad internship, was it? Said, on your LinkedIn profile, it says direct sales organization intern. Explain how you got that role and a little bit what you were doing in that role.
So that was crazy. The path to Google, because after my freshman year, my whole goal my freshman year was to get a marketing internship that following summer. I did everything I could. I got involved on campus. I did student government. I got a 4.0 GPA, everything, but still just couldn't snag an internship. And so I ended up having to come back to Fayetteville, and I couldn't even find a proper summer job. Like I couldn't even work at Toys R Us that was around back then. I know they're not around anymore, but I couldn't even get like a basic retail job until I ended up, my church let me work there as a custodian. So I was cleaning bathrooms and cutting grass and doing all that stuff. And that was a really pivotal summer for me because I was like, okay, because I'm the last person that likes to work with their hands. Like it just isn't my strong suit. So it was like I was on the complete opposite end of, what I enjoy doing or what I'm any good at. And so I came back my sophomore year of college on a mission. Like I was like, I'm not going back to Fayetteville the following summer. And so that's actually when, based on my experience, I wanted to help other students. And so I started an organization called United Black Professionals to help folks, get internships and with their future career endeavors. And funny enough, one of our partners was a group called Inroads. They're a big nonprofit organization that helps minorities get Fortune 500 internships. And so, I was working with them to help other people get opportunities, but then I ended up being able to get an opportunity with Target. It was working in the store though, like as a retail store manager. So like in the red and khaki, like everything. So it wasn't a marketing internship, but it was something that kept me from going back to Fayetteville. I had to sleep on a buddy's couch that whole summer to be able to do it. But it worked out. And then that led to you get a coach. I had an internship coach. And so we were thinking about, okay, do you want to go back to Target, after your junior year or, explore some other things? And so we tried Procter & Gamble. I didn't even get an interview. And then she came to me and said, do you want to apply to Google? And I was like, come on, like, I didn't even get an interview at Procter & Gamble. Like, what are the odds of things working out with Google? And so, but she encouraged me, and so I was like, okay, I don't have anything to lose. Why not? And so, I applied. Of course, long story short, everything ended up working out, and I actually ended up being the first person from UNC Charlotte to intern, at Google. So that was a big milestone that opened up doors for other people too.
So this was a woman at Inroads that encouraged you to do this?
Yeah, Amber Murdoch, one of the sweetest people on earth. Yep.
Is she someone that you still stay in contact with?
Oh gosh, I wish I could say yes, but yeah. After the internships and after I moved from Charlotte and everything, it's been a while. It's been a while.
Well, here's some SYCK advice that loose connections are so valuable. And if this person was helpful for you in the past, I don't know if she's one of your 7,000 connections on LinkedIn, but
I'm sure she is.
But maybe reach out to her, say hi, tell her you mentioned her on a podcast today.
Oh, it's totally worth it. Like it's a guarantee. I'll definitely follow up and see how she's doing.
Yeah. So what sort of role did you apply for, and what was the interview process like? So you were like a sophomore or junior in college at that time?
So I was a current junior, and it was an internship for the summer
between junior and senior year.
Between junior and senior year. Yep. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So yeah, it was a role. It was in the ad sales team, and so I was on and the funny thing is this retail thread, Alan. Like I think I need to go ahead and call it out because when I did DECA in high school, one of the categories of competition I competed in and won was retail, like retail merchandise management things. And then the thing that the actual category that sent me from the state competition to national competition was internet marketing. And it's so funny that then my very first internship was retail, working at Target. I ended up interning at Google on a retail sales team. And then when I eventually came on full time, Target was my first customer. And I've had this, I'm even I've had retail, like there's just this strong retail thread that has followed me. I've worked mainly with retail customers at Google as well. I've touched other verticals too, and it's just, I'll now wrap this up. I was working, before I transferred to South Africa, I was working with a Fortune 25 retailer as my customer in the US. And I come to South Africa where they don't have any customers for our customer experience team. And it's looking like the first customer I'm going to work with here is a retailer too. So and that's totally out of my hands. Like it's just what the leads sell. Like it's so serendipitous.
Do you think that helped you land any of those jobs because they saw that, okay, this guy worked at Target, he's worked with top 25 retailers. The more that you've worked in that industry, did that benefit you to get other jobs as like you're an expert in retail, even though you could probably be an expert in financial services or expert in pharma or anything like that?
It's so funny. I think it did, because for coming in to intern at Google and then placing me on a retail team, they had to see he worked at Target, there. And then when I came on board full time, I know that had something to do with why they assigned me to Target, to actually service them. And I think that just kind of set the trajectory for the most part. And then it just keeps, like, I'm telling you, this South African one was so weird because it looked like the big customer everyone's been focused on is a Telcon, but the deal just hasn't progressed as they thought it would. And so this is just it. I understood everything else, but this is super just random and serendipitous for it to come back around this way.
Yeah, cool. So you did your internship at Google. It looks like they extended an offer to you to return.
Yeah.
How quickly after internship did they extend the offer? So the internship ended in I guess the end of the summer in August. You joined Google the next summer in June.
Right.
Between August, like when did you find out that you got the offer to Google?
That's an interesting question, because I was told that I'd get an interview. I mean, I'd get word on either whether I got an offer or not in like late September, early October was the timing I was expecting. And so I was like, okay, I'm coming back from my senior year of college. Like, let me just see what Google does. And before I start, really hitting the job trail. And so September comes and goes. Early October comes and goes. Mid-October comes around. I start getting antsy. And I'm like, okay, maybe I shouldn't wait to see what Google does. Maybe I should proactively start doing things. So it's funny, like towards the end of October, I just couldn't stand it anymore. So I just started firing out applications, things like that. And then early November, maybe even November 5th, I got a call and, got the offer. And I never heard back on any of those applications that I frantically put out either. So
yeah.
It's funny.
Well, and when you got the offer from Google, did you accept it on the spot or did you contemplate it at all?
Alan, you're embarrassing me, man. Like, you're taking me down like previous thought processes that might be a little embarrassing now, but at the time I was a bit just slightly torn because I've become attached to Charlotte. I felt like all my network and contacts were there. I had some entrepreneurial interests at the time that I was, considering. Like, I wanted to start doing more, speaking and writing and like some other business ideas and things like that. And then I think I talked to one of my professors and he was like, man, your business idea is okay, but it's not great. And you should probably take this offer, And so, that was enough to sway me take the offer.
Yeah. And that's some sick advice that your business professor or your professor offered you too, because as people look for talent and hire talent, the fact that you have Google on your resume now and you've been there for a decade and you've moved up, that makes you so much more valuable for the rest of your career. And if you do choose to do those entrepreneurship items if you do like, and I know you've done some stuff on the side, like actually a lot on the side, that makes you all that more impressive. That's not just Fabian Elliott from Target, but it's Fabian Elliott who's worked a decade at Google and has moved up within the ranks there.
I mean, you're so right, Alan, because the expansion that Google provided me, like, you know, growing up, I might have been on a plane once or twice, you know, like I hadn't been to a lot of the major big cities. I hadn't, you know, traveled as an adult internationally or anything like that. And, you know, coming to a global company, all that, I was traveling everywhere domestically. You know, I went to Brazil with Google. I went to London, you know, Paris, like all these, like it, and the people and just, the credibility, like I could have, it would have been, I could have never, you know, got that type of platform or access to that type of platform if I would have just went and tried to do my own thing in a small southern Charlotte, which was my world, you know, at the time.
Yeah. So, and Google back then and still is ranked as one of the top companies in the world. But I remember you joined about the same time I did. I joined Google in May of 2011, and I think you did your internship starting in May of 2011. So we might have started the same day. I started May 11th. I don't know when your onboarding was. What like thinking about that, like even contemplating not taking that offer, like it's great that you had this advice from your professor, but what would you, and I hear it's your son, right? So but what would you have even done if you had turned that down? What would you have done? Or did you not even think that seriously? So like after your professor told you take the damn offer, what was the alternative?
When I interned, and I had a buddy, I won't mention it, I won't bring him into it, but we were very like entrepreneurial minded, and we were interning. We both did the internship at Google, and he had his startup, and I wanted to do a startup. But our plan was we were going to spend that summer there, you know, and then steal talent away from Google, and then go do our own businesses. was our game plan. And so I was looking at, you know, that I wanted to start my own digital marketing agency or things like that. Cause I had a couple like small business customers I was working with in college, and I had started doing speaking already at that time too. And so I was like, okay, I want to make the jump to do some more professional speaking. And then I was writing a book in college at the same, like my senior year too. So like I was just gonna go. That would have been the other path, was to, you know, kind of pursue some of those things.
What type of things do you like to speak on or write about? Like, are there particular topics that you're focused on, like either when you were writing that book or as you were contemplating a career in influencing people through written and spoken word?
At that time, it was like the book was going to be something on like college success, like how to be successful in college, you know, and so that was important for me because I had started a lot of this. I was doing speaking around the city, mainly like type of mentorship, like going to talk to high school kids, and like I was getting like called to come do things like that. And so it was mainly like mentorship focused, success focused, self-development focused, you know, at that time.
Nice. And you probably had very little experience then. You thought you had a lot of experience at 21 years old.
You think you know everything. Yeah, you think you know everything.
Do you still have aspirations to do you currently speak and write? And if so, is it about similar sort of topics?
Yeah. So when I launched, I know we're getting to Black Tech Mecca stuff, but like when I launched Black Tech Mecca in 2015, that kind of launched me also into the public spotlight as a public figure and things. So I did start doing a lot of professional and like paid speaking on diversity in tech and, you know, different things of that nature. Like people call it like West Virginia University wanted me to come out and like speak to their like male mentorship program, and then other universities had me come speak at conferences and things like that. So and then I also wrote a full unreleased book on Black Tech ecosystems that I just never got around to releasing. A lot of the topics were, since I was known for tech, they always had some type of tech angle. So maybe it was about how anybody can leverage technology to make an impact on society, or different topics like that.
Yeah. So let's talk about that too. You joined Google in 2011. I think at that time they had about 2% of their employees were Black. Now they've doubled it a decade later to 4%. It's still significantly lower than 13.4% in the US. And I know that's where you were before you went to Johannesburg. I think you were in Chicago last?
Atlanta for about a year, and then we came to Joburg. Yeah.
Okay. How was it joining Google as looking around and 98% of people don't look like you? And even when even now, 96% of people don't look like you.
It was a big red flag, especially in Chicago. Because when I got to Chicago, I remember at the time the office was probably about 600 people or so. And I remember the thing that was concerning to me was that there wasn't one Black male manager in the whole office. And I was like, this is Chicago, Obama, there's a lot. And just outside of Google, there are a lot of influential Black male executives and successful folks. And so for there not to be any within my organization, it was really concerning. I mean, there were 2 Black female managers, so there was some racial representation. But when I personalized it for myself and my profile of being a Black male, it was very concerning, to say the least. And so I think that's what also led me to, at the time, there wasn't even a Black Googler network chapter in Chicago. And so that was something I ended up starting a year or 2 after that. And, I ended up being a global co-chair, the first global co-chair for the Black Googler network, and did a lot of global expansion work. But it was interesting. I do even remember when I would go to say sometimes a customer meeting for the first time, I would, I don't need glasses, but sometimes it's trendy to wear, the personality glasses, I guess you call it. I would, I felt like an imposter in some of those meetings. So I'd wear the glasses to try to combat, other stereotypes, to appear more intelligent, through having, glasses. So I remember doing that sometimes in my early years.
Yeah. And then you started Black Tech Mecca. That was in 2005. So you were at Google for 4 years. Talk about, was that involved with Google at all, or inspired by Google? And talk a little bit what Black Tech Mecca is.
Yeah, so it was somewhat inspired. So one of the main things that drove, so I did a lot of internal work at Google, and then I wanted to do more direct community work. So what the driving force behind a lot of that at the time was that I would look at the conditions of the Black community in Chicago and in the US, and then my eyes were opened on how it was a global phenomenon, how the Black diaspora in Europe, in South America, in other parts of the world were in similar conditions. And then, at that time, at least, 18 of the 20 poorest countries were in Africa. And so that really opened my eyes and impassioned me to want to do something or help to support the global Black community or improve our conditions. And so that's what was my main driving force, where at Google, I started reaching out to Black Googlers in other countries and asking hey, how's it going there? Do you all need support? Because at that time, the Black Googler network was only in the US, and it was only in a handful of offices.
It was pretty big, in New York. New York was
right in New York, yeah.
That's where I was. I was one of the more diverse.
New York and Mountain View.
That's where it wasn't it's not like the New York office was 15% Black, but it was probably the highest representation of all the offices, I would imagine.
Yeah. But to me, it was this is a global company. If you're Black and you work at Google, no matter where you're at, you should be able to have support or, a community you could plug into. So long story short, I did a lot of grassroots, and we ended up, when I became global co-chair, we ended up expanding and launching chapters in Brazil and in Dublin and South Africa and things of that nature. So once we accomplished that, I really felt a lot of satisfaction, because that's, what I was really setting out to do at that time. And, things in Chicago were just getting a bit more and more worsening. And so I was like, man, it's great doing work within Google, but at the end of the day, even if these are underrepresented folks, they're privileged Googlers. Like, these are not the most at risk, most, folks that need a hand. And so a key to our success in the work we did with the Black Googler Network was collecting data. So at that time, this was before the data report, the Google report was even released and went public. And
the quality report or the diversity report.
Exactly. So I was actually global co-chair when that went out. And that was crazy to coordinate and be involved in.
And I think that came out in 2014, I believe.
It did.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, you're right. But for example, at that time, you couldn't get any Google Geist, which is our internal employee survey. You couldn't get any of that data by race, even if you wanted to. And so we started our own BGN Pulse survey, so we could collect data and then use that data to inform programming and then go get resources, because we had data to back it up. And so that's where I really saw the potential for using data for social change. And I was like, man, if we can do this in companies, why can't we do this in cities? And if we can't figure out how to do this in cities and communities, these companies are never going to get any better, because that's where people come from. If you're not improving the communities and cities and building the pipelines, and you're not going to ever see the type of impact you want to see in companies. And so that's where the vision for Black Tech Mecca was born. And so we focused on research and data and developed a 39 indicator, 120 metric framework to score and assess a city's Black tech ecosystem across K through 12, higher education, corporate, and entrepreneurship. So it took us a couple years to develop the framework, because we had to work with universities, and then we had to hire a research director and do all these other things. And so we ended up completing studies in 3 cities, so Chicago, Philadelphia, and Minneapolis.
And you were there for almost 5 years, and then but Black Tech Mecca still exists, right? After you founded it?
Yeah, so we got acquired by the Black Innovation Center that's based in Miami, formerly known as Black Tech Week. So they've been long-term partners, and we had just secured almost $500,000 in grants and to expand our research. They were really good at what we weren't so good at. They were great with events and advocacy and doing things with the data. We had built our core capacity on creating the research. And so it was a natural, fit. And, at that time, just career-wise, while working at Google, while running Black Tech Mecca, I'd also gotten married and had our first child. So my life had changed quite dramatically. So I had to start to evolve with it and, make some of those decisions.
Yeah. And I was at Google same time as you. I left in 2016. You're still there. But I remember 2013 with the Trayvon Martin murder. And that kind of was despicable. And there were lots of events internally about it. I remember some senior Black leaders like Torrance, Bonita, and folks like that. There weren't a lot of Black leaders, so they had to go to every event essentially. And I've actually spoken to Torrance a bit, and it's tiresome as being one of the few Black leaders to be his job was sales and ad sales, and his job is not necessarily to be the face of Black Google, but he was kind of either asked or stepped up for it or whatever. But I remember going to some of those town halls, and it was very enlightening to me. It was I think the first time I heard the term microaggression. And Torrance related a story about how he got pulled over in his car in Palo Alto because I think he went to Stanford. And just because he was a black dude. How was like, I heard a lot there, and that kind of started to inspire me. I got involved with the Sage Guru program. I don't know if you're familiar with that at Google. But I found that a lot of it fell on deaf ears. It was good. There's a lot of good that came out of that. Like they started, the diversity report came out in 2014, and I think other companies have followed. I don't know if Google was the first, but now a lot of the top companies report on their diversity data. It all sucks, but at least they're sharing it. How was it as a black Googler during that time? And I'm sure there were several other incidents that I don't recall, but that one particularly was a big one that kind of galvanized the whole company for a lot of talk. I don't know how much, like, I would love your perspective from that, and like how much action you felt occurred in the next, like from 2013 when the Trayvon Martin murder occurred, 2020 with George Floyd. There was a ton of bullshit in between as well. But how did you feel as a black man and listening to a lot of this chatter? And there was some action, but like, how did you feel?
Well, so I mean, first starting with the point you made about Torrance, and like the black tax that you feel, or the diversity tax, it is grueling. And that's one of the things when I would talk to companies, throughout my journey, and they'd ask about diversity. I'm like, you have to take care of your folks like that are burning the candle on both ends, because I've seen people get burnt out. I experienced it. I tell you, like, even from my experience leading a global ERG at Google.
An ERG is an employee resource group. Yeah,
an employee resource group. It dated me a bit, to be honest, Alan. Like, I don't do much internal Google diversity work anymore, because it was almost like scarring. Because it's almost a traumatic experience of just the work, some of the BS you have to put up with, some of the failures, like, and trying to create change. Just the bigger picture is like trying to create change in any area is tough, but especially in this area. But the positive side, though, is I've seen how the conversation and the action has evolved and progressed. Whereas, like you said, in 2013, it felt like it was falling on deaf ears. Like, now you flash forward 2022, diversity is trendy. Like, it's like, it's cool to care about diversity. And now it's, you don't have to convince people why it's important. Like, to me, it's generally accepted that it is important. And now it's just about, okay, how do you action on it? And how do you get, measurable results and impact? So I've been really pleased by, and it's terrible. It took so many tragedies and deaths and pain to get here, but I feel like it has progressed where, now there are more just organized action plans and investments and resources, that are happening, where I feel like 5 years, 7 years ago, it was still an uphill battle, but now it feels like there's a bit more momentum.
So I don't know how many employees Google had in 2013 with the Trayvon Martin murder. When I joined Google, it had about 26,000 employees. Now they have 140,000 employees. So they went up about 100,000 employees. Maybe like 80,000 since Trayvon Martin's murder, where we talked a lot about it. The percent of black Googlers has gone from 2% to 4% roughly. So even though they hired 110,000 more people, the percent of black is still extremely low. So what do you think can be done either by companies, or if companies aren't moving fast enough to address this inequity? What actions can individuals take? That's actually what I care more about, because there's a lot of things that the companies can do, and they can choose to do it or not. But being in the fact that we're still in a situation where there's only 4% black Googlers, 3.4% in Salesforce. You can look across the industry; it's pretty standard. Outside of Amazon, where they have about a third Black, but that's counting the delivery drivers.
Exactly. Yeah.
But what do you like? Okay, that tells me that there's systemic biases in the system or something going on. So as an individual, as a friend of yours, like when friends ask you, how do I get into Google? How do I get into Facebook? How do I get into Salesforce? What do you tell them? How can they circumvent these pressure or the friction that makes it as easy for a white dude to get in there than it does a Black woman?
Yeah, I don't have a great answer there, Alan, to be honest, because it's you're right. It's compiled. There's layers to it, whereas the first layer is it's incredibly difficult for anyone to get into any of these companies. Is that first layer, and then the other layer is, the companies, like, there's biases in the process. They're trying to combat those and figure them out and things like that. I mean, if I have to be very honest, because the whole challenge is network. Because like you said, there's 4% now. The chances that somebody at Google or one of these companies, if you're underrepresented, is much slimmer than if you're not underrepresented. And so it's not as easy as just like, oh yeah, I'll talk to my uncle's friend or cousin or something like that. I think that's where programs like yours and others that help folks, where if you're not fortunate enough to have a natural organic connection, entities like your program and others, to me, help bridge that gap and help to mitigate, that inequity, that network inequity, to help get things going.
Yeah, and I fundamentally agree with that. So the way I got into Google is a white Jewish dude that I went to college with. We're having drinks, and he's buddy with a white Jewish guy that he played softball with, Ben Sates. I think you know Ben.
Oh yeah, Ben. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And I love Ben, but I spoke to Ben, and I don't know if we had the common Jewish tie. We actually happened to go to the same undergrad, Binghamton University. Okay. Whatever. But that kind of opened the door after 5 rejections from me at Google. For finally, I submitted resumes and I didn't get, I got either a canned response or no response at all. And then I spoke to Ben, and he realized that I was decent. He put me in as a referral. I still had to go through 11 interviews, but that came easy to me. I was just having dinner with a buddy who played softball with a buddy, and I chatted with him. There are ways that I do think that people can be proactive. You almost have to realize that, hey, I look at Google and 96% of people don't look like me. However, there's 140,000 people at Google. I can look to find people that would be willing to talk to me. And that's kind of what I do with Kadima is you gotta ask. Not everyone's going to help you, but a surprisingly high amount of people will help you. Like when I reached out to you, you didn't have to respond to my email. And we were introduced by a common thread, but because of that, then we chatted, and then we've continued our relationship, and it's grown over time, but just through that connection. So I think that what people need to do, and it's harder for people to do. For me, it came naturally. I was just having drinks with a buddy, and we were talking about lots of things, and then the Google thing came up. But for people that don't have that luck of serendipity, you have to kind of make it yourself.
Yeah, that, and we're not even talking about just core competency. Networking is like the cherry on top. Is like, okay, once you have to be ready once you've gotten to that point, and that's a whole other conversation of being prepared to take advantage of those networking opportunities. Yeah.
So I look on LinkedIn, and you have 7,000 followers. So you're and that's a high number. For reference, before I started Kadima, I probably had 1,500 or 2,000. Now I'm approaching 6,000. It's not a numbers game per se.
Yeah,
it's not a numbers game, but it's an indicator of some people just hoard themselves out on there. But my hunch is you have a lot of authentic relationships there. So give me some and I'm guessing you've had some good advice over the time from people. How have what's been effective for you to build relationships through networking throughout your decade-long career. So Fabian, what have you done to grow your network, not just in quantity, but also in quality over your career?
Yeah, it's funny because, one thing that I started even in college, even when I had much less to offer at that time, was anytime I'd meet a professional, even though I was a college student, I'd always offer help to them. So I was like, hey, I'm a marketing student. If you ever need help with anything marketing related, let me know. And so I don't know why I even thought to do that. I can't even, trace it back. But, for me, it was always, when I would meet someone, I was always looking how to serve them or how to help them. And, you can't help. Sometimes people don't need your help. But, when you look for ways to offer it or look for ways, finding out what they're trying to accomplish and how you can help them accomplish it, I think that's helped with the depth of relationships. As far as the breadth of relationships, a lot of that has to do with just when you're speaking to large rooms of people, someone will come and, shoot you a connection request and, things of that nature.
Nice. So going back to your Google career, very successful career. You've been there 10 years. How many roles have you had, do you think? And it's hard to tell sometimes at Google because you get reorged all the time.
Yeah.
Or how many times have you got promoted over that 10-year period of time?
Yeah, so promotions only twice, to be honest. I'm on the cusp for a third one, so we'll see how that goes. But as far as roles, when I came into the G-Tech ads organization, that was my first job coming in. I didn't officially change roles until 7 years later when I switched to cloud. Other than that, it was natural reorgs. So my title would change every 18 to 24 months and my responsibilities would evolve every 18 to 24 months. But yeah, to be honest, that was my first actual major change, was coming over to cloud.
So before that kind of change just happened to you, either reorgs happened or managers switched or
Right.
Usually reorgs.
And to be honest, it was perfect, Alan, because, I had other interests. I was running the BGN, and then after that, I was running Black Tech Mecca. So, and that's honestly what kept me at Google so long, was I was able to pursue my other passions and interests, and, my job was my job.
Yeah. And what caused you to decide to move into cloud from the ad side?
Yeah, it was a few different reasons. One was I was looking for, a change on the ad side. The last few years before I left, we were doing more project by project consulting type work. And so I wanted to be aligned with the business and go deeper and be more intimate, and be more focused with customers. And so I was interested in that. And then we wanted to relocate from Chicago to Atlanta, and my current team didn't have headcount in Atlanta. And so, those things just kind of came together and ended up with me moving to cloud.
How did you make that change happen? Did someone pull you? How did when you said, okay, I want to leave this role in Chicago for this role in Atlanta? How did you make that happen?
Yeah. The funny thing I failed to mention was that there had been other roles I was interested in, during that 7-year time period, but none of them worked out when I went for them on my own. But what was different about this time was I actually worked with my manager. So before, I was always just looking for roles on my own, and I thought it would be a conflict of interest, or why would I partner with my manager? But this time, I partnered with my manager. I told him it was, family reasons I was looking to move to Atlanta, and two things. One thing was the cloud role. When I looked at the description, I didn't think I was qualified for it. And I was self-qualifying myself out of it. But then I was talking with my manager at the time, and he was like, Fabian, you're being too serious and critical about this. They'd be lucky to get someone who has 50% of what they're asking for. You'd be great at this, go for it. And so that was another perspective that opened my eyes. Was, I don't know if it's, underrepresented people who do this at a higher clip, or if everyone has trouble with this, but sometimes you'll read through a job description. If you can't check the box on everything they're looking for, people will disqualify themselves.
Imposter syndrome, limiting beliefs. And there's a lot of research out there that it impacts Black people more, women, especially when you have the intersectionality there. So, but your manager said, "Hey, dude, you're good for this. You can get this."
Yeah. And then so he connected me with the director on the team that I was going for. And so, I met with him and, talked to him. And, then I went through the interview process with, the people that report into him. And everything just worked out. And I was shocked. I was like, man, all the times I was trying to do things by myself, and my current manager, not only encouraged me to go for the role, he even did an intro for me and, helped me out.
Why do you think you didn't approach managers in the past? What did this manager do something differently to engender your trust, or what do you think, or like what led you to ask this manager versus you probably had 10 managers before?
I think what led me to him, like other than just us having a strong relationship, there was the foundation. I think what also facilitated it was I was upfront with him that I wanted to relocate to Atlanta. So we were exploring options on if I could relocate in my current role. And when we found out how challenging that would be, that's when, it evolved to, okay, let's start looking at other roles. So.
Got it. Cool. So we're wrapping up now, and I like to ask a couple of questions of people to get some of your like SYCK career advice that you've had. So when people ask you for advice on their careers and how to accelerate their careers, what's some common pieces of advice that you give people?
Yeah, so I'm just a conductor. So like the advice I give is probably good advice I've gotten, and other people, everyone probably does that. But I know one of the best pieces of advice I got when I was younger in my career was don't necessarily chase a particular title or something that a role, like focus on what problem you're trying to solve or a problem you're passionate about solving. And so that advice actually led me down a lot of the community and social work that I ended up, social impact work that I did. So I feel like when you're just trying to figure out direction very early in your career, that was something that, was really helpful. I guess another, piece of career advice is just like, always, giving yourself options. So being very careful about making decisions that dramatically limit your options. And so an example for me was when I was about to launch Black Tech Mecca, I was deliberating whether I wanted to leave Google to focus on it, full time. And then I was challenged to, reevaluate my options. I ended up just first doing a 3-month sabbatical, and taking off to focus on it. And I got to feel how it was to focus on it full time. I got to see how it was to not make any money for 3 months as well. And, coming out of that experience, I was like, man, I don't think I would, like, I'm not ready to focus on this full time. It's not where it needs to be, where I'd get the return that I would need, for the energy that I put in. So yeah, I'd say, figuring out a problem you want to solve. Secondly, always trying to maximize your options and not, limit your options. And then there's a book you're probably familiar with that I really like, by Cal Newport. So good they can't ignore you. Yeah. And he talks about it's very counterculture. What he presents is, don't follow your passion, just get really good at something and like think of yourself as a craftsman, and then you'll become passionate about that craft. And so I think that's been a pretty good piece of advice too.
Yeah, I'm a fan of Cal. Like I know he does a lot of productivity hacks and saving time hacks and things like that. So, but now is it safe to say that you're making some different decisions? So you're not necessarily following your passion, not to say you're not following your passion, but you chose to move halfway around the world to Jayburg from Atlanta to be closer to family. You may not you're not doing Black Tech Mecca outside of Google.
Right.
You have 2 kids now?
One, yeah.
One kid. So is it fair to say that you're making different decisions now, than you would have 10 years? Like the life comes in and influences the decisions as well.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I wasn't prepared for. Like I felt like, when in your earlier stages of life, before you get into family life, it's, you live and die by your career almost. Everything's about you and what you want to do. And I got to be honest, the transition to then, integrating family and finding a balance was, is and was challenging, for me. But, I feel like I'm starting to find that balance. And it's really just about your priorities and deciding how to distribute your energy and how that's going to, meet your priorities and what's most important to you.
Yeah. Nice. And then you mentioned Cal Newport's book. This is the last question I'll ask you. Are there particular books that you suggest to people, podcasts you suggest to people, anything as they're thinking about their career and how they're taking proactive charge of and control of their career that you often recommend to people?
Gosh, I know that So Good They Can't Ignore You. I've recommended that book over and over because it really opened my eyes. I think another interesting book that's on the cusp of that is it's a financial book, Your Money or Your Life. That book is about money, but it's like a deep philosophical life book about separating, your life's work from what you do to make money, and just thinking through things like that. So, that actually gave me some clarity around, okay, what I do to make money doesn't necessarily have to check all my fulfillment boxes. Like there's other ways to get fulfillment out of life, and it's okay to, separate and delineate. So I think that's another, good book that I found myself recommending a lot.
Well, thank you for listening to the SYCK podcast and spending some time to listen to Fabian's story. You can connect with us at syckpodcast.com. That's SYCK podcast.com. You can leave an audio message for Alan to get started on steering your career with Kadima, and we'll answer some of your questions on upcoming episodes. Alan, do you have a little teaser on what we can expect on some future shows?
There are so many things to tease you and the audience with, Russ. We are going to be talking with hiring managers and recruiters at some of the top companies in the world that are going to be revealing the inside tips and secrets about how to get noticed, how to get considered, how to get jobs, and how to negotiate for more. So lots of fantastic episodes coming up later in the year.
Perfect. All right, we hope you enjoyed today's episode, and you're going to love the next one.